Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. I am super excited for today's video because we are going to be doing the palette 5000 tag that was created by Chic Geek. You guys know, if you're a longtime subscriber, I absolutely love to talk about eyeshadow palettes on my channel. So when I saw that Chic Geek created her own palette tag, I was super excited to do it just because I love to talk about eyeshadow palettes. So she will be linked down below, as well as the questions. So if you are interested in answering these, whether they be in the comments or doing the tag for yourself, I would love to hear your guys' answers to these 10 questions. And if you would like to hear about my answers to the palette tag questions, stay tuned. First, if you have yet to subscribe to my channel and you like project painting content, palette themed content, or just chit chatting about makeup, I'd love if you'd consider subscribing before moving on. And other than that, let's jump into the video. Okay, you guys, I have been trying to get use out of my Tower 28 Bronzino bronzer, and so I have it literally all over my body up here, which I really like. Although I'm like, it looks kind of streaky. I feel like it's looking streaky on the viewfinder, but I really like the way that it looks in person. But now I'm realizing that like my body is like much more tan than my face, so just ignore that. Also, I have like, I don't know if I have these like random bug bites or if I have like, I just have like itchy skin all the time. I know I have really dry skin, but I got hydrocortisone cream today to put on my like bug bites or whatever. I have, again, this rash on my arm. So if you guys have any suggestions for like dry itchy skin, other than today, I'm trying hydrocortisone cream for the first time, so let me know what your thoughts are there. Okay, you guys, there are 10 questions to this palette tag, and I thought that these were really interesting questions. Like, definitely made me think outside the box and just really unique to any other like palette tags that I personally have done. So I had so much fun picking my palettes for this. And the first question is a palette that you wore to a special occasion, and I thought about choosing my Dose of Colors Friendcation palette that I wear to every single country concert, but I went with something else instead, a much more special occasion in my opinion. And I am going to be discussing the NARS Summer Solstice palette, and I wore this palette to my daughter's kindergarten graduation, which was a big deal to me. I can't remember if tears were shed. I feel like tears were shed, and I wasn't expecting myself to shed tears just because I am a sentimental person, but like I don't cry that frequently. But it was literally just like, I can just see the day in my mind. There was like karaoke there. It was just such a good day. So I just wore the NARS Summer Solstice palette and did like a really easy neutral warm toned look, but this palette already just holds special place in my heart. One, because of that, but two, I just wore this all summer 2020, I think it was, and this is the palette that like made me fall in love with NARS. So I wore this to Zoe's kindergarten graduation, and it is a very near and dear palette to my heart. The next question is a palette you love that is repetitive, and I feel like I'm cheating a little bit with this one, and you'll understand why in a moment. And before you like gasp and say, Steph, I thought you said like this wasn't a repetitive palette, let me get into it. So the first palette that came to my mind was the NARS, the Natasha Denona Gold palette, because when I first saw teaser pictures of this palette way back in the day when it was releasing, I was like, who in their right mind would buy this palette? Because it's just a bunch of like brown matte shadows that literally all look the same. Like the teaser photos, I remember thinking like there were like 3 or 4 of the exact same brown shade in the palette. Now, when you have this palette in your hands, which you can't get it anymore, I'm so sorry, there actually is quite a bit of distinction between each of the matte brown shades. So I actually don't think that this is really a repetitive palette, but I also didn't have a lot of other palettes in my collection that I felt like I could speak about for this specific question. Plus I love the NARS, or not the NARS, the Natasha Denona Gold palette, so any chance I can find to talk about it, I want to. The two closest browns really are like these two right here, but they're not even like that close. I absolutely love this palette. If you own this palette, maybe this is like just a reminder to like, this is your sign to pull the Natasha Denona palette out now. So I feel like I was cheating a little bit because I actually don't think this is a repetitive palette, but I couldn't think of anything else. So I wanted to point that out in case you've been thinking it's a repetitive palette. it's actually not, in my opinion. Next up is a palette you've gotten your money's worth out of, and I feel like this is gonna be super obvious. This is my Pan That palette for this year, but truly this is the palette in my life that has gotten the absolute most use. Even going into this year before this became my Pan That palette, this is the ABH Sultry, by the way. I feel like this was like my most used palette in my collection already. This is what this palette is looking like now. Not to like spoil my upcoming update, I don't have that many exciting things to share. So hopefully that didn't spoil it too much, but I will be decluttering this palette at the end of this year, no matter how many shades are still left or what this palette is looking like. But I have already used this well over 100 times this year, and I think I had at least 100 uses going into this year. So this palette has definitely gotten my $49 money use out of it. Next up is a palette that is an amazing deal. And I struggled a little bit with this one just because me personally, I'm not super into drugstore makeup just in general. I just prefer high end. But when I started to look through my collection, and now that I'm thinking about it, I'm like, I really do feel like really any Glam Light palette is a pretty good deal as well. But I went with the Alter Ego Artemis palette. This is a 28 pan palette, I believe. It is the dupe for the Natasha Denona Metropolis palette. And for $22, first of all, you're also getting a huge mirror. You're getting 28 really high quality shadows. And this palette, unlike the other Alter Ego palettes that I personally own, this actually has some like weight to it. It's really, really nice quality packaging as well. So I definitely think this is worth the $22. Probably more. Like even if this was priced around like the $40 to $45 mark, I still think that would be a fair price for this palette. So I definitely do think this is good value and a good deal. Next up is a quad that you wish was a full-size palette. And I recently did a makeup declutter. I decluttered quite a few quads, so I don't have a ton in my collection, but truly one I would buy in a heartbeat if it was a full-size palette is the NARS, or why do I keep wanting to say NARS? Oh my gosh, is the Rowan 1111 quad. Now I will say, each of these 4 shades is really unique in that it is kind of like a cream to powder or just like a cream shadow type of formula. This shade right here is like a little bit chunkier. It adds a really beautiful like sparkly texture to the eyes. So I'm thinking if this was like a full-size palette, it wouldn't be like 9 or 12 or 16 special like cream shades like this. I'm thinking like there would be these 4 like special cream shades, but then there would also be a mix of like matte powders, like maybe some like dusty mauves to like go with some of these shades. Maybe there would be some like metallic foiled shades, but they wouldn't be like cream shades. I don't know. I would love to see what Rowan would do if they made this into a full-size palette, and I absolutely would snatch it up if it existed. Number 6 is a palette that you love the quality but hate the packaging. And for that, I'm gonna go with the Kaleidos Escape Pod. Now I will say this is not like an everyday color story for me. It's very bright, obviously, but when I am wanting color, and even if I want just like a sparkly lid topper with like a neutral look, this is a great palette to reach into. The quality in this palette is so good, so superb, especially for being these like really bright, colorful shadows. I think the quality is so good, but it is this really chunky, bulky packaging, which just isn't my absolute favorite. So this one came to mind. I also could have talked about the Club Nebula palette. Love the quality in that palette as well, similar packaging. But I really wanted to talk about the Escape Pod, one, because it is currently my level 3 palette in my Project Level Up, so I've been reaching for it more. But 2, I just think for these bright, vibrant colors, it is such good quality, but I could do with different packaging. Number 7 is show us your dream palette in singles. So for me, when I purchase single eyeshadows, I'm really looking for just like special shades. That's typically why I'm buying a single shadow. It's usually a really sparkly lid topper, a multi-chrome, duochrome. There's something special about it. And I don't own a lot of like matte single shadows. So when I put together this curation of shades, it was really just like my dream special sparkly shade, special shade single eyeshadow palette. This would not work for like creating a full look out of it. And I will include swatches of this and maybe do like a voiceover with what shades they are, because I don't feel like turning them all around right now. How many shades do I have? 4, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 18. I have 18 shades in here. RIP to this shade right here. This is Peachy Keen from, I think it's Clarity. No, JD Glow Cosmetics. I was putting it into this palette and dropped it and it shattered, so I had to repress it, and I feel like it did okay repressing. But these are just 18 of my favorite special shades amongst all of my single shadows. So I again will include at bare minimum swatches. The majority of these are either Terra Moon, JD Glow, or Clarity Cosmetics shadows. There's one ColourPop, there's one ABH. Who remembers ABH Pink Champagne? As I was going through my single collection, I was like, I totally forgot about ABH Pink Champagne. I love that shade so much. I am definitely interested in purchasing some singles by like Shine by SD, Cleota Cosmetics, Davina, other places like that. But majority of these, again, Terra Moon, a couple ColourPop, one ABH, but then also JD Glow and Clarity Cosmetics as well. There might be a Give Me Glow thrown in here as well, but those are my 18 dream single shadows all on one palette. Number 8 is 2 palettes or more maybe that you like to combine together. And the 2 palettes that came to mind, just because I do this combination quite a bit, especially it seems like this is like my patio drinking combination. I really haven't been patio drinking with the exception of one day this summer, but it is the Natasha Denona Mini Nude palette, which I love and truly can just create a really beautiful look out of just these 5 shades. But if I'm wanting to do something a little bit extra, I love to just either pop on this green shade right here or this sparkly like lid topper that also has kind of a shift of green from the Pat McGrath Bronze Seduction palette. It just seems like I'm constantly using these 2 palettes together more than any other palettes that I could really put together. Like these 2, they come in a pair pretty much when I am using them, and I don't necessarily have that with the rest of my palette collection. Although one other combination I will point out that I have been loving lately is the Rowan 1111 quad mixed with the Aether Beauty Rose Quartz Crystal quad. I really like to like lay down this shade as like my matte base, and then use usually the chunkier really beautiful pink from here, and then use this as an inner corner highlight. And sometimes I'll go in with this on the outer third of my eye if I'm wanting to deepen it up a little, but this combination I have been loving lately, so this is another pairing that I would also recommend. Question number 9 is a large palette that you wish was smaller, and for that I grabbed, this is the first one that came to mind. I don't have a ton of like super large palettes, so this was another tough one, but I went with the Natasha Denona Biba palette because I kind of wish the Biba palette was a midi palette. For some reason, I feel like if this was one of the Natasha Denona midis, I would reach for this much more frequently than I do as like one of the large Natasha Denona palettes. I don't know why that is, because if you compare the two, like there's not a huge difference. There really isn't a huge difference at all, but I just get so much more use out of my midi collection, and this is like the perfect everyday neutral palette. So really I should be using this more, but I just feel like if this was a little bit smaller, still had the same amount of shades, 15 shades, but was midi instead of large, I think I would get more use out of that. Okay, and then the 10th question I thought was the most challenging for me, which is interesting because the question is an eyeshadow palette you wish had a matching face palette. And I will say over the last year and a half, I've been so much more into face palettes than I ever have been in my life, really. But I was like, ooh, I really don't know. So I came up with this one. This is the Glaminatrix Nearly Natural palette. Nearly Natural or Nearly Neutral? Nearly Natural. Nearly Natural. Why did I think it was Nearly Neutral? Anyway, this is what this palette is looking like. Just a really, really beautiful, sultry, glam eyeshadow palette. And I feel like if this had a matching face palette, it would just be neutral, natural colors that were just like glam and blurring, maybe with like maybe a beautiful like highlight or two. I just feel like there could be a really, really beautiful, natural, neutral leaning face palette with this. And I also just really struggled. I was like, I really don't know, but I'm gonna go with the Glaminatrix Nearly Natural palette. I think that there could also be a really beautiful Nearly Natural face palette. And after that, those are the 10 questions to the Palette 5000 tag. I would love to know in the comments below what your answers are to one or all of these questions. Let me know if you were surprised by any of my answers. But that's gonna wrap it up for today's video. Thank you guys so much for sticking around to watch and for supporting me and my channel as you guys always do. I love you guys so much, and I will catch you in my next video. Bye.